Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share educational information on a variety of topics. This is this case was sentenced really recently. Welcome to anyone that's joining live. Let me go ahead and put my banner up because the information that we're about to listen to is the victim impact statements of particularly the sisters in this case. Let's start with a general overview of this case. And I have a link to a video that I did reviewing some of the testimony in this case. But Timothy Ferriter moved him and his family. So he adopted two children. The oldest is a female. The victim who they were able to bring charges for what he went through, that individual was also adopted at about 18 months. And they moved around a little bit. They were in Florida for something like I think it was maybe like 6 or 8 weeks. That child ran away from home. And when that child was located, they realized that the family had built a special room in their garage, and this room did not have a bathroom. This room did not have windows. It did not he could not control the lights in the room. All of those switches were on the outside, and that he was locked. The lock to that room was on the outside, and he had no way out of this room. And within the home, there was no room for this child. And what I mean by this is, so there was a room for the sisters. There was a room for the youngest. So one of the sisters, so this child also had, the family had a birth child. So I think around the time they were adopting him, they ended up having a little girl, I think shortly after. So they had three kids that were all very young, all at the same time. And in my stream, anyone that watched, let me know in the chat if you remember me mentioning that I thought that Timothy Ferriter, that he might have had a pat, like that maybe he had some military connection. Because the way that he was quote unquote disciplining, and he's been found guilty of abuse in this case, what he was doing reminded me of things that I've seen with particularly Marines. Like, I'm just being honest, particularly Marines, just his level of control that he attempted to have, and the things that he was upset about. So he was upset because the child like took some candy from someone at school, or the things he was upset about because there was a doctor that came in on the case, and that person like tried to say that there was the level of behavior was so extreme, because so that person diagnosed this child with reactive attachment disorder, and the prosecution did a phenomenal job, because it's like, how can you say that his behaviors were based on what happened before he was adopted, and he's had all of this trauma post adoption? How can you say that? And the defense expert was like, yeah, the way that they parented could have contributed to his difficulty attaching to them, and those different things. And I don't know the diagnosis of that particular child. Welcome. He was extremely controlling. Hello, Darius. To anybody that's joining on the replay crew, I will add some, I'm going to add the timestamps. So today's Saturday, so I will add it by Sunday, November 19th, probably later tonight, but we'll see. And so I started covering this case, and I marked it on my calendar to check in when the sentencing happened. So we are going to start out with Timothy Ferriter's statement. So he starts, so some other people spoke on his behalf. The defense submitted some anonymous letters. So that was They also had a woman her child had reactive attachment disorder, and she went through a lot with that particular child. And I think the reason why they called that particular person was to say people who aren't raising a child with this type of diagnosis, they don't understand. But I did not like, and let me say this again, I despise the fact that the defense, what they did to create a defense for Timothy Ferriter, was they said he had no other choice but to do all these things because this child was so out of control. And like the kid, like he wrestled with his sister sometimes. Like, to me, nothing he did was to that level. And in my mind, he also wasn't actively receiving any type of treatment at that time, at the time of all this was on. They're also, in this case, I'll bring up the fact again, this child did not have a room inside the house. Now, I am not pleased with the judge was in a difficult spot. And we are going to get to the final sentencing at the end, especially after hearing the sister's statements and all of that. Because the judge, there's something called downward depart. I am not a lawyer. I'm a psychologist. I'm not a lawyer. So the judge, I guess he went below what the minimum was. And I do believe the state is going to appeal it. Okay. So if you heard what the state said at the end of sentencing, I do believe that the state is going to appeal his sentence. Let's start with Timothy Ferriter's statement, and then we're going to listen to the child, the victim in this case, to his statement, and then we're going to listen to a therapist who treats the girls, and then also treats the victim in this case. Where we'll listen to her. And then we'll jump ahead to sentencing. All right. So the audio is crap. Okay. And I don't have any way. So prepare your ears for this audio. Okay. Because this audio is not great. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this audio and I'm gonna turn the closed captioning on too. Okay. In 3, 2, 1, let's go.
In my Catholic faith, we define love in the following way. Love is willing the good of the other for other. Let me say that again. Willing.
Okay, did everybody gain? So I don't know why the audio is so horrible on this. And from right here, I don't have a way to edit it. Okay. So I'm going to play it again. Okay. I'm going to go back and play it. This audio it's the way that it was recorded. It's going to be for his statement, but he's starting out talking about love. So I'll let his statement play through so that I can pause it and we can adjust the sound and we can go from there.
The good of the other for other. What do I mean by this? I'll give 2 examples. If at 2 a.m., my wife or I got out of bed to attend to take care of a crying baby, Fiona, Ronan, Noah, or Pierce, that act of getting out of bed to take care of the crying child is not necessarily for the benefit of Tracy or myself. It's the benefit for the crying baby. Another example, a family of 6, we as a family of 6, Tracy, I, Fiona, Ronan, Nola, and Pierce, would routinely visit nursing homes. We would ask to visit the elderly people who never got visitors. Bringing the kids would always burst with smiles on the faces of everyone. This act was primarily for the benefit of the elderly people in the nursing home, not for the 6 of us. Everything I did was out of love. I pray that as a father, you empathize with this. My life is not about me. Rather, my life is about giving it up in life, especially for my family, while willing the good of the other for other. Next, I want to speak directly to my family. Ronan, I love you. Your mama loves you. We're all very sorry for everything. Everything you have gone through, and everything you continue to go through. I am empathetic to where you are placed now. I did all that I could to help you avoid that. As your father, I wish I could be by your side now and stand strong with you. I thank you, Ronan, for your honesty and courage when you spoke of mercy a few weeks back. Ronan, you were my first boy. I miss our boys' time together, Ronan. Our outings together. You're such a smart boy, young man. I miss all of your creative ideas you used to share with the whole family. We could always depend on you to come up with something creative and to build something that needed to be built. Well, keep up the curiosity and the desire for learning. I love you always, and please know that you'll always be my boy. Fiona and Nola, my beautiful girls, I'm deeply sorry for all that you have had to endure for almost the last 2 years. My job as your father is to protect you from what has happened to you since February 1st, 2022, and I have failed at that. Please know that I love you both now and forever, and nothing will ever change that. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor present things, nor future things, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature will be able to separate us from the love, from this love, from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. You are both resilient young women, Fiona and Nola. And in the end, everything will be okay because God has a plan. Fiona, when you are ready, feel free to reach out to your extended family, including the grandparents. Everyone loves you, Fiona, and are waiting with open arms to embrace you, to love you. In the end, Fiona, all you have is your faith in your family. I miss your sweet personality, your beautiful smile, and our intellectual discussions on literature, current events, religion, and other inspiring topics you came up with. I miss watching Hamilton with you. I miss hearing you sing the songs. I miss listening to the Beatles with you and Coldplay with you. I miss going on daddy-daughter dates with you. I love you always. I will love you always. You are my girl. Nola, your energy and personality always fills the room, and I love that about you. You are talented in so many ways. From your baking birthday cakes for everyone every year to your athletics. In my heart, I will always be in the stands cheering you on. Please remember this. And I'll be in the stands all the way from now until you play for Notre Dame or Arizona. Keep the joy in your heart alive, Nola. Don't lose that caring nature. I miss playing catch with you. You always threw the ball so hard it hurt my hand. I miss shooting baskets with you, playing horse one-on-one, watching you dribble between your legs and around your back. I miss coaching your various teams. I miss coaching you and Fiona on basketball together. You brought many blessings to my life, and I'm grateful for that. Nola, your extended family, like I said to Fiona, including grandparents, love you and are waiting for you with open arms when you are ready. They are your only family, Nola, and we miss you dearly. I quote St. John McGraw when I say to my kids, have a great day. Ronan, Fiona, Nola, Pierce wouldn't remember it, but have a great day. Know that I will always love you, Nola. You are my girl. Pierce, my baby boy. I know you're very young and don't understand what is going on, but please know that I love you, and everything I did was for you. I quote you, Pierce, when I say, I miss you always. I love you always. Please know, Pierce, that I do miss you always. And I do love you always. I hope to be able to play hide and seek with you again, to be able to coach your t-ball team again, and to be able to go on bug adventures with you again. By the way, Noah, Pierce is also hitting from the left side of the plate, as I know you are, and he has a couple of home runs already, so watch out. Tracy, my beautiful, selfless, loving wife, you always do everything for our kids and our family first, and take care of yourself second. You are the most selfless person I know. We love all of our kids the same and initially adopted Ronan from Vietnam, so Fiona did not have to grow up without an adopted sibling, and so she had another Asian kid with her, as she would be a minority where we lived. I miss all of them, and I love all of them, as I know you do. We would do anything for our kids. Once all the kids were taken, the house was silent, and all the beds were empty. We began this sad, sad journey together. Now we have even been separated. Please keep your faith strong and know that as none of this makes sense, we must believe that God has a plan. We know that there must be a bigger reason for all this suffering. We know we like this, so I'll say this to you. When the storm comes, do like Simon Peter and keep your eyes on Jesus. I will always love you, my beloved wife. Finally, I want to note that on the first days at the gun club jail, I've been jumped multiple times. I have had my head punched and beat until bleeding. I have been approached and threatened by multiple people that if I don't pay them on a weekly basis, I will face consequences. Also, everyone recognizes me in jail, which makes me a target every day for every new person that crosses my path. I understand the court has to make a tough decision at this point in any case, and I empathize with you and that grave responsibility that you have. I also plea of you, Judge Coates, to use your discretion to lean into mercy for my family and myself to make your decision. I ask that you allow me to serve my sentence outside the jail or prison, under house arrest, or a monitor, or under probation, so as to be able to support the ones I love and the ones that depend on me. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Webb, any other witnesses?
Okay. Let's all. So I hadn't watched his statement. I knew that the judge said that he did not show remorse for what he did. And that's where, if I was his attorney or if I was working with a client on a statement like this, I don't do forensics. So because it would be a jail psychologist or counselor that might help with something like this. Yes, he did just ask for probation. Oh, sorry, that's the yep. Yes, he did. He only wanted house arrest, I guess, and probation. So he never said what I did was wrong. To me, his apology to his girls was stronger than his apology to his adoptive son. Anybody else feel that way? His apology to them, he clearly said, "I'm sorry for what you endured." He did not say that to Ronan. He didn't say that. Did I miss it? I don't think I missed it. So what he did, you can't even do this to so this child was locked in a room for sometimes before dinner until the next morning. And he would have to use the bathroom around like 8 p.m. And the reason why he's been found guilty is because he placed a Ring camera in there and the jury was able to see exactly what happened. He has put his hands on this child. I think it's my understanding that he's been physically aggressive with this child. Nothing he did was attachment or trauma informed. You shouldn't treat any child like this. You should not do what he did to any child. You definitely don't do it to a child that was adopted. And the judge is going to bring up later the fact that he was raised on Quantico, and the judge is going to speculate that there was likely some type of like military involvement. His use of the Bible, it infuriates me, because that is not love. That is not what he did. Was not that was clearly that A word, ABUSE. Like sometimes YouTube flags things when I say things. That was harmful. That what he did was not. It wasn't just like, and the judge will call it discipline in the sentencing, which because he's been found guilty of child neglect and child, like I think like he's been found guilty of all of those things. And y'all make sure y'all are breathing, make sure I think the victim in this case, his testimony, I think he might be coming next. I completely despise the fact that this was called discipline. I am, because somebody asked about parentification. So because to me, the statement by the victim in this case shows some of that trauma bond and shows some of that parentification. Okay. And yes. So I grew up millet. So my dad is retired Air Force. There are people who know they are in the military, their family is not. I did a video recently on helping service members who have PTSD. And that's something, if I do have people that are being overly punitive with their children, I will make certain recommendations around those things. I do. So I think the victim in this case, I think he ended up in some type of inpatient treatment for a period of time. I think this, I mentioned it on my last video on this case, and I want to say it again before we get to his testimony. I think he has a tremendous amount of guilt. I think he just wanted to get himself safe. I think he wanted a break for himself. I think he didn't like what he was experiencing. And yet this is his parent. I also want to tell y'all legally what often happens is that people who harm their own children typically get a lesser sentence than if you do it to somebody else's child. If he had done this to somebody else's child, the judge would have had a different response. And yet, because it was his child, I think the judge was kind of trying to be a understanding parent. Like, you did this out of love. You weren't being vengeful. And I'll say it because I've said very clearly, if this is love, you can have it. That is not love. And what the judge found is actually incredibly common. Okay. I do this type of work every day. The fact that he got any jail time. So I think it was the level. And if this had been a shorter period of time, but the fact that there was no room for this child, then I think that's what made this. I think that's what made this go a little bit further. I think he despised the fact that this child would be sneaky the way that teenage boys are. My 6-year-old tries to be sneaky. Okay. Like I think he had no tolerance for disobedience. I think from when you listen to the girls, it sounds like the family walked on eggshells for his anger. It sounds like there might have been some drinking, or I don't like the girls mentioned some things. And so we will get to things that they allege in their statement. I was also very mad at the defense because the defense tried to keep their statements out because they weren't the victim. But I will tell you, witnessing somebody doing this to your brother, that causes harm. So the person witnessing it can cause just as much. At times it can cause more because there can be this guilt of I didn't stop it, even though it wasn't their job to stop it. it was Tracy's job to stop it. Let's talk about Tracy. Let's talk about Tracy. So she has not been found guilty. The state, I don't even know that they have a date for her trial. It's my understanding that Timothy asked for his trial to be separate from hers. It's my understanding that she still has access to that youngest child. I'm not going to play that part. If you go back, I have the full link to all of this on Law and Crime, because the prosecution brings up the fact that so Tracy's mother adopted the youngest child, and the state believes that Tracy is possibly having unsupervised time with the youngest child, and there's no court order. Once someone is adopted, the courts do like this. Okay. Now, if they had like foster care prevention in place, if they had something in place, or if they had put it in the adoption order that there could be no contact with anyone who's been found guilty of any type of like harm to a child or who's currently under investigation. So they did not include any of that language for the youngest child. The youngest child is also having contact with this individual every day over the phone, according to the prosecution. Okay. That was interesting to see and hear. Like I said, I'm not going to play that part. I think the sound on this next part is going to be a little bit better. And so I think I will be able to pause it. I think this individual either came in by Zoom. So this is the victim in the case. And I think the testimony, I think it was, I think he might have been there in court. All right. So let's go on ahead and listen to this part. I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger so we can see this part. My reactions aren't going to nearly be as dramatic as that last one got me, because I just can't with Tim. I just can't. Those are my opinions. It's not my because I don't know because there were some terms being thrown around in the chat, and the reasons why there may be some potential signs of narcissism. So I have not assessed him. I cannot give a clinical opinion, just in my observations of narcissism in general. The things that were kind of red flags for me in his statement is that his statement to me was all about him and the victim he is and all that he's losing and all that's happening to him. To me, there wasn't anything that was about like the impact of his behaviors on the children without blaming the court or with him taking responsibility for his part. Individuals with narcissism, not saying he, but like individuals with that diagnosis. Ooh, I do have a video on Can Narcissists Love? I use Alec Murdaugh as that's the person that I use. I will make sure to link that video in the description as well, or have it at the very end, because with a narcissistic parent, what happens is they love from their perspective and how is that individual reflecting positively on them. And they will often withhold their love and withhold their affection and withhold any type of like positive towards the individual if they're not doing what they want them to do, or if they're not making them look good. If you remember during court, Tim Ferriter, his hair was all like there wasn't a hair out of place. He sat there emotionless, just talking. Even with his statement, he had a few times where it sounded like some emotions came up. But once again, I felt more like he was crying. And this is my opinion. I felt like he was crying for himself and like the consequences of his actions, and not necessarily like for that guilt or remorse for what he has done. I didn't see any of that. That's just my personal opinion. Let's go on ahead and listen to the victim in this case. The sound is better on this one, so I think I'll be able to pause it as it goes.
I came here today to see your face again. It might be the last. So let us make this right. Would it not be proper to say our last goodbyes? It looks like we hit a fork in the road, and it seems that I can only fit on the path on the right. but you were left with the left one. Some might wonder why I came to see you again. A lot of people do not like what you did to me. Why come back?
And even his statement of a lot of people don't like what you did to me, I still do not think this child fully sees what he experienced as not okay. Okay? This and the girls, this is going to bring up big emotions, okay? Like this is going to be hard. All right? Let's keep going.
Well, it's because behind this monster of madness, guilt, anger, and wrongdoing, I see a soft spot. I see what you truly are. I know that hiding in the darkness of fear and blame, there's true fatherly love.
Now, the one thing that I will say, this child, so this is the only father that they've ever known. And it is common. Somebody mentioned Stockholm syndrome. It's common for there to be this bond. And that's why these types of situations that happen when the family is the perpetrator, that makes it confusing for the person. Because in our minds, we think, my parent wouldn't do something to hurt me. My parent loves me. My parent, there's this cycle of violence. And within that cycle, things aren't necessarily bad all the time. I think things were bad a lot often for this child, and for his own mental health, he might be focusing on, I know that you love me, because if he were to fully think like that there was no love there, that could make it to where he wanted to give up. Does that make sense? Like there might be a part of him that protectively needs to think that his father did love him to just kind of care for himself. Like I've seen that in session a lot.
In the exact same spot, there's nurturing. I believe that it can still be activated. We just need to excavate the corrupted parts of your heart. Most people think that I am sensitive when it comes to talking about you. That is true and false. I do want to talk about you. That's because I still love you. And I'll always love you until the end of my days. I just wanted to say that I wish you never did the things you did to me. And I think that it was just a long dream.
I'm glad that, and I bet you it either came from the child or it came out of therapy, because I'm glad that he said, I wish you never did things that you did to me. Because I'm glad that he acknowledges that it wasn't okay, and that he was able to say that to him face to face. I do believe that he is in the courtroom. That's what it seems like.
I want to say that you never left. When every day passes since we last made contact, I feel like everything is slowly taken away from me.
He lost everything.
I want to say I miss those brown eyes. I miss knowing.
That was a weird way to say it. Did anyone else find that weird? Like I miss those brown eyes. That was weird for me. Was that weird for anyone? Like that was to so the way that this child talks to his parent is the way that I might talk about my child. So I would talk about missing my child's eyes. I don't know that my child would say that he missed my eyes. Does that make sense? Like I don't think my child would I would say that about my child. And so that's why I think this child was parentified in a way. That was very, very weird to me. All right, we're gonna keep going.
And what you're doing.
He just said, I miss knowing what you're doing. Like I miss knowing what you're like. This child wants to talk with him about his day. So it would have been different if he said, I miss telling you about my day at school. I miss telling you, like that's typical of a child. But for a child to say, I miss hearing about your day, like so I don't talk with my child about my day. I don't vent to my child. Like that's a conversation that I might have with my partner, I might have with my mom, but I wouldn't do that. Okay, so parentification. Parentification happens when children are placed in a role where they are not in the child role, they're in the parent role. I want to pick up like a really good definition. So it occurs when a child is regularly expected to provide emotional or practical support to a parent instead of receiving that support for themselves. It's a reversal of roles where the child is responsible for the parent's emotion. This is really common within toxic family systems. So to me, this child was clearly the scapegoat. So the scapegoat in the family is the one where like all of these problems. And one of the children is going to talk about how one child was kind of the golden child, the child who could do no wrong. The oldest child said during her court testimony that she could do the exact same thing this child did and she wouldn't get punished, but he would be severely punished if he did the exact same thing she did. And so there can be this so where the child, so like this child would be told to do hours and hours of yard work, or like I don't think this child looked to the parent to have their needs met appropriately, or that they had to be good in order to be loved. I'll say that again. This child may. So I don't know this. I've never done therapy with this person. In my clinical work, I've seen it happen where the child felt that the parent's love was dependent on what they did. It was not unconditional. There were clear things that this child could do to lose his ability to even eat with the family. This child, they would give him like cheese sandwiches. I don't, or not cheese. They would give him like different meals. Like he didn't eat the same food that the rest of the family ate sometimes. Like he couldn't get a snack. He had to ask for a snack and he could be told no, but the other children in the house were able to get snacks whenever they wanted to. And so we talked about control in food, especially with adopted kids. You do not control it that way. Um, all right. And so going back to parentification, some examples of parentification. So like it's different to have an older sibling watch a younger sibling, but the parent tells the older sibling, like, okay, but like that older sibling isn't responsible for disciplining the younger sibling. So if the younger sibling does something wrong, like the parent is going to step in and parent their child. A lot of times this happens if you look at like the Duggars. So the Duggars, how they kind of have, and this is from the accounts of, is it Jill? I want to say Jill, and some of the children who have kind of left and spoke out about what they've experienced as kids. Like what can happen is that older children are like the parents for the younger children, or it can be where the child is expected to meet the adult's emotional needs. All right. I hope that helps. Let's keep going.
I also miss knowing how your day has been. I keep on thinking about you, whether I'm in a good mood or not. When I said I was family, I was something I really meant. I just wish you the best.
He can barely look at him, but like he's looking at him a little, but he can like barely look at him. And Timothy, he is crying. I don't know what's bringing up the emotion for him. He does appear to be crying.
I want to say that you were everything I needed all along. But
Which is so I'm sure Timothy liked hearing that. You were everything I needed all along. So my husband isn't everything I need. So I don't believe any one person can meet all of someone's needs. I cannot, my child, he's going to complain to his therapist one day about like, I don't know, like he's going to complain about stuff. And oh my gosh. So I love the comments because, so I kind of raised myself for like the last, like once I could like leave on my own, we were latchkey, like we were like we let ourselves in the door. There were no ring cameras to like watch us come inside, or like there was none of that. So I laugh not because this is funny. I laugh because sometimes we need to lift the mood a little because this is so painful. Okay, like that's why it's easy to be parentified, but you don't object because you want to make the parent proud. Exactly. And also, like, a child doesn't have a choice. Like, so parentification is something the parent puts on the child. Like, the child often doesn't have a choice because there are people. So like, if my child came home crying, I wouldn't say, stop crying, you're making me sad. I wouldn't say, like, your behavior is causing me to lose it. Like, no, like, it's not my child's job to manage my emotions. Now, what he does might have an impact on my emotions, but it's my job to take care of me. It's a whole thing. All right, let's keep going.
Baba, I want you happy whether or not it's with me. I wanted to be with you. That is something I wish I really meant. Right now, you're facing heavy consequences, but that is something that I cannot change. My father was a good person who just made a really serious mistake. He was not a bad parent. He worked in the medical field when I was a young age. We went on to out of country vacations such as Canada and France. He had a lot of friends. He had a positive impact on those around him. But we got to remember that a mistake was made, and trauma lasts. It can burn through people's brains, souls, hearts, and destroying everything in its path. It creates pain. It creates suffering. It creates hate. And the last thing I want to do is hate.
So I think this child has really done a lot of work. And what I will say with that is, and I want to highlight a comment because I don't think he was a horrific parent all the time for this child. So there were times when he might have, like, I don't know, like the bare minimum. I don't know. But I think sometimes, have you ever known somebody that lost somebody and their memory of them was all positive and they couldn't remember any of the negative? I think the way that the relationship ended abruptly with him going into foster care and him being kind of, he might feel responsible that because he ran away, because the police found out what was happening, that's why his sisters are in foster care and his youngest brother adopted out, and just the impact, because he has been trained in this high control group. So high control groups don't only have to be like there are high control groups that can be families. There seemed to be a high need for control in this household, and this statement seemed to kind of try to get back in Timothy's good graces, but then also to still talk about what he did experience. And so because to me, this child, I think he may feel more guilty if he didn't say the things that he said today or that day. I think he wanted to ask for leniency, and that's what he ends up doing. I think he wanted to ask for the judge to be lenient with him, and yet, I don't think either side, and the judge says, I don't think either side will be happy with this decision. On appeal, I don't know if the judge's reasoning for doing a lesser sentence, I don't know if that'll hold up on appeal, and we'll see.
A lot of people dislike you because of your actions, and some have feelings of hatred. However, I still love you, and I will continue to love you for the rest of my days. But how do I feel about you? I feel sad. I feel sympathy. I feel hope. But most importantly, I feel forgiveness. Other people may not think that, but I do. In that, I hope you can gather yourself and try to follow up on the consequences of your actions.
I wish I knew what he said to his lawyer right there. If you notice, he said something real quick. I'm going to try to rewind it and see, because and we're not going to be able to hear what he said, but he says something to his lawyer right there. And I talk about forgiveness, and for me, I am going to do a video talking about Tyler Perry's Maxine's baby. I watched that documentary probably maybe next Saturday. I might do that one. And then I also want to do a video on Netflix. There's a series about high control groups. It's the one, oh gosh, Twin Flames, something like that. Like there's one on Netflix. I'm definitely gonna have that coming up soon too. But forgiveness doesn't mean, from my perspective, it means because that hate and betrayal, it can eat you up inside. Now, this child has every reason to hate him. Okay, if he came into my office hating his father, I would totally understand that. Forgiveness is a personal choice, and if a person says what they did is too wrong, I could never ever forgive them, no problem. What Tyler Perry often talks about is the fact that when I am hating someone else, they might be like moving on with their lives, and it's like that poison I'm taking. And that, but sometimes we're using different words for different things, because forgiveness is not reconciliation. And just because I forgive someone doesn't mean that I will ever see them again. No one knows what it was like. So this child spent, I want to say, was it like 13 years in this, maybe 12, I don't know, maybe 4, I forget exactly how old he is. He spent, I think he might have been in high school. Was he in middle school or high school? My brain can't remember exactly how old he is. I think the sister might be 17. He might be almost 16. So I think 15 years of his life, I think this is what he experienced. They started getting more punitive with him after they had the baby boy. And I said it in another video, and I've seen adoptive parents do this, and it would have been normal if this child had been a little bit more, maybe was a little jealous, or I don't know. Like, it would have been okay if he might have been a little jealous with the next child coming in. Or now there's like another son. Because with his sisters, but now there's like another boy. It would have been normal to me if maybe he had an increase in some behaviors, or if that was a bit of an adjustment for him. Okay, we're going to try to keep going. I'm going to come back to the chat.
Other people may not think that, but I do. In that, I hope you can gather yourself and try to follow up on the consequences of your actions. Just remember that I'm still your son, no matter what. And always remember that I'm still a Ferriter. And Judge Coates, I wish you could sentence my beloved father, Tim, 6 months jail time, 5 years probation. And true mercy is not just from the heart. It's the will of the victim to accept mercy that he has received for his wrongdoings.
Thank you.
Next, I have a victim.
Okay. I definitely understand why this child is saying what he's saying. It is incredibly sad. Okay. The statements are about to get worse. Okay. So if you have to, take care of yourself, drink your water. I also have some tea here. Like, please, please, please. The sister's statements to me were more impactful. And even the oldest sister's testimony, that was what the jury asked to hear again. When the jury was deciding whether Tim was guilty or not, they asked to hear her testimony again. And to me, her words are just very, very powerful. Lisa, I want to see, do you think first going into therapy, he had hate and rage, and working through that, he let it go? I don't know that he ever had the hate or the rage, because I think this child feels like there's something wrong with him. Based on his testimony, I could not watch all of it because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Now that I've seen the final thing, so I was able to listen to the sister. I was not able to listen to all of his testimony, because there were parts of it where he was almost saying, like, I deserved it almost. Is that like he was just trying to get me to learn. I wasn't changing my behavior. And I have huge problems with that, because this was clearly harmful legally. Like there's a legal word for what he did. And I think that's a problem. Yes. All right. So now we're going to get to the therapist that's going to testify, or that's not testify. That's going to give victim. She's going to talk about trauma bond. The sound isn't great, so I might just let her go mostly through. I'll try to not interrupt that part.
Victim impact statement from Dr. Waller, and she's on Zoom.
Okay,
I'm going to fast forward.
action's overruled. Where is she in Zoom here?
Tracy.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Dr. Nikki Waller. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been providing trauma therapy and support to Gila, Ramona, and Nola Ferriter since shortly after they were removed from their parents' care and entered into the foster care system in February 2022. This statement was approved by all three children, by all three of the Ferriter children, Ronan, Fiona, and Nola. But I'm specifically here to talk about the impact that Mr. Ferriter's behavior had on the Ferriter daughters. Trauma bonding is a process that occurs between a victim and a perpetrator. The victim becomes reliant on the perpetrator to meet their basic physiological needs.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to
As
interrupt.
time passes,
Hold on a sec, doctor.
I am going to object to relevance, Your Honor, as it relates to the victim impact of the daughters, as they are not listed victims in this case, and it's irrelevant. I believe that the only victim impact that will be relevant is RF.
Response?
You can consider broader impact for the purposes of sentencing. They provided numerous letters about all of his good character, and so the impact of his actions, they want you to consider his good acts and the impact that he has had positively on the community, but they don't want you to consider the impact that he's had negatively. Is completely permissible consideration in a sentencing hearing.
All right, the objection is overruled. I will continue to allow you to proceed with your statement, Dr. Waller.
thank you, Your Honor. The victim becomes reliant on the perpetrator to meet their basic physiological needs. As time passes, the victim becomes grateful to the perpetrator for allowing them to have the basic fundamental things that humans need to grow and to survive. Abused children are uniquely trauma bonded to their parent perpetrators. Children generally rely on their parents for their physiological needs. They also rely on their parents to provide for their safety, security, and love and belonging. As parents provide these essential tools, children learn to become social, safe, and independent. Most children who are abused and deprived of their fundamental needs by their parents start to develop neurobiological differences. Over the years, these children become conditioned to believe that the things that their parent perpetrator provides to them are normal. The victim believes they are loved, supported, and cared for, despite the treatment that they're receiving, even when the situation is very different. The victim in return develops a deep love for their parent perpetrator, many times believing that they are to blame for any mistreatment or mistakes that have taken place on the parent perpetrator's part. The victim will defend their parent perpetrator to others and even take on a blame role for any behaviors that they believe are their fault. I've had the unique opportunity to process with Nola and Fiona Ferriter their beliefs, fears, tears, rationalizations, and realities about what has happened in their family. The hardest thing for the Ferriter daughters is the ongoing betrayal that they feel. Each of them is depressed, anxious, and afraid, but mostly they have a deep sense of betrayal from their parents and extended family. They love their brother, they love their parents. Fiona and Nola both understand that Ronan is trauma bonded to their parents. They wonder how long it will take for Ronan to heal and for the trauma bonds to break. They both wonder if Ronan's trauma bonds will ever break, or if their brother will even survive the abuse that he's endured. The betrayal that the girls have comes from the deep and relentless misrepresentation of their brother and his behaviors to the general community by their parents, the media, and their extended family. Over the past 8 years, the girls have watched their brother lose a sense of himself, his happiness, and his freedom. They remember the lock outside the door when he was under 8. They remember when their parents first removed Ronan from the family home when he was about 10. This happened just after a new baby took his place in his bedroom.
Exactly.
The girls remember Ronan put into the room in the garage, locked from the outside. Fiona talks about remembering the locking, lights off, crying, lack of food, and no access to the bathroom night after night. She remembers her brother scream as she listened to her father beat him, and then she'd hear knocking. She slept in silence, terrified, wondering if her brother was still alive on the other side of that wall. Over the past 18 months, the girls have shared very different versions of how Ronan behaved in the family home, specifically about the incidents circulating within the general news media. The Ferriter girls tell stories of 3 happy siblings under the age of 5 or 6 playing together. The Ferriter girls remember the injuries that Ronan allegedly inflicted on others, occurring during playtime together, not because of the calculated vengefulness that one sibling had for the other, but because they were children playing too rough. The girls remember Ronan taking the door off the hinges of the locked bedroom when he was around 10 years old. This incident was right before his parents moved him into the garage. They remember that Ronan was so tiny when he was 10. They wondered how he was able to get the door off the hinges. The girls remember the door falling on their mother, who was on the other side of the door. They remember Ronan trying to get out of his room to use the bathroom. These are the sordid stories that their friends read online and then look at them and wonder about at school. The girls didn't understand what was happening to Ronan at first, but they developed their autonomy. As they developed their autonomy, they began to question why their parents treated their brother so differently. They began to wonder why they were all treated so differently. They began to wonder why they could live in a world, why they could live worldwide, live in a beautiful house on 10 acres with a pool and a golf pad, and go to private schools, but their brother didn't have a regular doctor or therapist to help them. They began to understand that their brother was running away in an attempt to get out of a horrible situation that he was in. They began to become afraid of their father, citing his unpredictable behavior, and of their mother for not stopping it. Nolan and Fiona will tell you that Ronan is kind, gentle, and caring. Ronan was on the ring tape speaking to his father. Everyone heard it. While Ronan's father was angry, challenging his behaviors, threatening to lock an ankle monitor on him, and threatening to take him out of school to homeschool him further within his locked room, Ronan answered his father respectfully, demurely, and never once talked back. That's the brother the Ferriter daughters will tell you was present most of the time that they were together. For the girls, hearing that their father was parenting Ronan poorly and that it was Ronan's fault that he was locked in a room for hours upon hours is the most upsetting part for the Ferriter girls. The girls will tell you that their dad has a college degree and has traveled worldwide, helping others succeed. He has 3 children that he treats very differently. Nola was recently able to spend time with an uncle that she hadn't seen in years. This uncle physically resembled her father. The resemblance was so uncanny that it threw her back a little. She wasn't expecting anyone to look so much like her dad physically. She spent a few days with this uncle and his family. She learned that this uncle was very different than her father. He was kind, he was loving, he was attentive, he was personable, and he was gentle. When it was time for her to leave, she broke down into tears when she got into the car to return home. She was sobbing. Her question, how did my dad get it so wrong? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And then I have 2 victim impact statements. Your Honor, the first is from Fiona Ferriter.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I ask Dr. Waller one question, please?
All right. And so she brought up a phenomenal thing with trauma bond. And I want to share an image about the stages of trauma bonding. And so 7 stages of trauma bonding. Number 1 is love bombing. So that's where the love is excessive. And this is how the individual hooks them. So at first, it is all positive. It's all good. There is like this love, but that stage is to make up for what's going to come down the road. Because if there wasn't that love bombing, there would be no connection to the person. You can't do the gaslighting if you don't first love bomb. Okay. And trust and dependency. Does anything to gain their child or partner's trust and dependence. So dependent, where I'm the only one that can meet this need. Like I'm the one that's doing all these things for you. Criticism. Blames and criticizes the individual to make them feel bad about themselves. It breaks that sense of self. It breaks that sense of who they are. They want them broken down so that they don't realize they do not deserve what's happening to them. No one, yet less their father, no one should ever talk to them that way. They want them to think that they deserve this. Gaslighting. So gaslighting is where you reframe things, where so an incident happens, the parent harms the child, and then the child's like, but then the parent says, you know, you made me do this, like it's all your fault, you know, if you shouldn't have done that, and they put it back, or it didn't happen, it wasn't that bad, you're you have no reason to be upset, what I didn't, you know, hit you that hard, or they say things like that too, and that ends up messing with the person's mind, and it's a form of manipulation where now they don't know what's truth and what's not, and children are particularly susceptible to parental manipulation because it's normal for a child to want to trust their parent, like that's normal. Addiction. And so that's where the partner or the child gets like emotionally addicted to positive reinforcement that comes after the bad. So sometimes with this cycle, there can be a honeymoon phase where things are okay for a period of time. And then there's the tension builds, and then there's another explosive thing. This child's, there didn't seem to be a break in it, like I've seen with other cases. And because this child was in that box every day, loss of self, and then resignation and submission, where they're just like, I can't fight it, like this is what it is. And I think you clearly see that with the victim who you know, the one who the case was brought because of. You clearly see that with him, I think, and also his therapist said. So I can say that. All right. So the defense wants to ask the therapist a question. I forget what they ask her, so let's watch this part.
I will permit it.
Thank you.
Dr. Waller, can you hear me?
Loudly.
This is Priya Murad. How are you? Dr. Waller, your statement was specifically asked to the 2 girls, correct?
From there, yes.
Okay, and is that something that you wrote and that they approved?
That's something that I wrote in all 3 children approved.
Okay, and then you haven't, I believe in several months, if not a year.
Okay, so they're going to go back and forth about whether she is actively seeing the youngest child, and I'm sorry, not the victim in this case, and she is, because I think maybe the defense thought that this child was still in that. So I don't know that they were in residential. Okay, so I don't, just based on what's happened, and there's a break in care, and I've been doing this long enough, that's normally why. I think it's, yeah, that's normally why.
Personally treated, like, was there a...
I'll allow the question.
And
I'm
when...
just going to fast forward.
Correct.
I'm just going to go back.
Ms. Moran, do you have any follow-up questions? Thank you, Dr. Waller. All right.
The first is from...
Okay. Reminder, these 2 are tough. Okay. Let's go ahead and watch the sister statements. And the attorney is going to read it for them.
Fiona Ferriter, Your Honor.
And this individual is the oldest that was adopted from, I want to say China. I want to say I want to say she was adopted from China. China and Vietnam, not the same. Both, yes, both but like they're, yeah, not the same. Because they wanted to adopt. So they adopted RF specifically because he was from an Asian country, and they wanted a Asian sibling for the. So even like his whole adoption. I have to make myself big to talk about this. The whole reason why he's in that family is to meet the need of his oldest sister. They didn't want her to feel bad. Can we talk about that? I think that just hit me for the first time. The whole reason they wouldn't have adopted him from Vietnam, I don't think, if their first child wasn't adopted from an Asian country. The only reason why they adopted him, or like the reason why they were open to an adoption from an Asian country, was because they wanted an Asian sibling for the oldest child. Just because you have two Asian children that are both adopted, that does not mean that they are going to get along, that they're going to feel any less isolated, especially if they choose to live in not very diverse locations. They would still need to connect them with their community. Sometimes I've worked with companies, so like that's called a cross-cultural, I believe that's the right term, adoption. And with those types of adoptions, the family has to be really, really careful about making sure to expose those children to their culture. I find that a bit objectifying too. I think they like he was there for the sister. Okay, if we didn't already have enough red flags, okay, we're gonna keep going.
Where to begin? There is a lot I could say about this situation. My name is Fiona Ferriter. I am Ronan Ferriter's older sister and the eldest daughter of Timothy and Tracy Ferriter. I wanted to share the impact of my brother's abuse on him, my sister Nola, and my other brother Pierce. Consider what it is like to have lived in a house where you can hear the screams of your younger brother when he is not in his room. Screams of frustration, hurt, anger, fear, helplessness, and despair. Where you can hear your father yell profanities at him. Where I could hear my father beat him to the point where my brother was no longer screaming, but crying out in pain and barely able to answer questions. I thought it was over after I heard my dad slam the door shut and storm up the stairs. But no, it was just the continuation of a cycle I knew would start again. That happened too many times to count. It was the same thing. It became a routine. And I couldn't do a thing to stop it. All I could do was hope the storm blew over and that no one else would be targeted. Nola, Ronan, and I all played the game of hot potato with a bomb that could explode at any moment. Who was going to face Tim's angry tone next? Was he going to rage? Would he slam the door? Would he shout? Or was he going to stuff his anger down his throat and plaster a smile on his face and let us off with a warning? No one dared push him past his limit. We didn't want to be the next person locked in our room or restricted from leaving the house. I learned to clam up when those eyebrows drew together and those eyes darkened. We learned to ask for things at the right time when he was content. I tried yelling back once. It got me nowhere. He disregarded my attempts to get him to listen. All he could see was disrespect. All he could hear was a rude daughter. The moment I discovered that he couldn't hear me, I snapped my jaw shut and matched his glare. I looked for any sign of an understanding father. He couldn't see or hear the daughter that just wanted her Baba to understand her, to listen to her for once. That's all she wanted that dark night when she looked up at her father's unyielding face. Instead, she went to bed with angry tears and left behind a stone statue of a parent. When we went out, we all put on the best family faces. We were the perfect Ferriter family, and we were the Ferriter kids, perfect, polite children, each with our own strict roles. But if you looked closer, you would see the cracks that opened every time the door shut and we were in our own home. You'd see that the oldest child who watches her family silently, trying to keep it from fragmenting. You'd see a middle brother slowly start to stop smiling in pictures. Then there was the younger sister, who, despite seeming like the golden child, barely opened up to her parents. And finally, there is the baby, who fortunately is not quite old enough to fully understand the thin layer of glass his family walks on. We were all actors, pawns in the game of life my parents wanted us to play. My brother ran away several times. These are the two major instances that I can remember. The first night he returned seemingly shocked and slightly dazed. He never told me what happened. To be honest, I probably saw less of him after that. The second instance, he didn't come back. I remember my mother sending me down into the dark of Arizona to our driveway to call for him.
You ask about parentification. That's parentification, okay? The mom didn't go to get him because she thought he would be more responsive to the sister, okay? Like that's parentification.
He thought that he might be more likely to answer me than her. I wanted to ask her if she knew why. It's not right that a child should not come home when their mother, who should care for them, calls them. But of course, my brother didn't. So I walked down that driveway and called for him. Even though I called for him, I whispered to myself, "Don't come back. It will be so much worse if you come back." By then, I was past the sensor that our driveway had and was looking out into the inky blackness of the night. For a moment, I considered how easy it would be to run after my brother. After all, my mother was on the porch and the sensor wouldn't be able to tell. I had the chance. But where would I go? And more importantly, who would take care of my other siblings? So I turned.
Who would take care of my other siblings? So who would, like, so that's once again a child feeling like they have to stay in this harmful situation to care for the other, like a child, not a parent. Like, this is so impactful. She is phenomenal. This is incredibly triggering. Okay. I'm gonna, and okay, I don't have words. This is wow.
Turned back and walked back inside the house. That night was scary. My younger sister came into my room and we had the most serious discussion, maybe longest discussion we had ever had in a while. I could tell that we both did not feel safe in the house. So I offered to have her sleep in my room with me, something we hadn't done since elementary school. I placed a little bell on the door and told her if something were to happen, we would hear the bell and be ready. We talked about our parents. We wondered if they would ever divorce because we could hear them shouting at each other. Eventually, our brother came back. Things got worse. They started to keep him in the laundry room with no pants. One time, they blocked up the door with boxes so he couldn't get out. He was kept on even more surveillance. At this point, he may as well have been a prisoner. My father found him with a cord for charging a phone. When he asked my brother why he had that, my brother told him that he was going to try and hang himself. My father mocked him, asked him, "Did you really think that could hold your weight?" My father may well have laughed in my brother's face. It reminded me of a different time my brother had mentioned suicide. We were at some hotel and my brother was sitting on the floor. We were arguing about something and he shouted at me that he wanted to kill himself. At the time, it was my mother who brushed it off. The effect was the same for both times. The only difference is that the broken defeat in my brother's voice instead of the angry shout as he admits his desire to die. There were other instances, other signs I should have noticed, but I didn't, and I could do nothing. I couldn't do a single thing to stop any of it. I couldn't stop my father from grabbing my brother by the back of his neck. I couldn't stop my father from lifting my brother up the wall with only one hand on his neck. I tell the same story every time, and it's still on my mind. What if my father had killed my brother? What if he had died that day in front of me? What if he had suffocated or his neck had snapped? What if it happened and I didn't see? What if I woke up one day and my brother was no longer with me? They could say it was an accident, but that's not the point. My brother would have died because of my father's anger. All I wanted was my father's approval. That's all we wanted. We wanted to hear him congratulate us on a job well done. When we were younger, we heard the praise, but my brother slowly stopped hearing it. In exchange, he heard crass language coming from a man who was supposed to be his caretaker, his protector. I know my brother was hyper. He needed something to do. He needed more attention. He did not need to be told that he was going to end up in jail if he kept acting the way he did. He needed guidance of what's right and what's wrong. He did not need to be slapped like a bad dog. He deserved answers and more help. None of that was given to him. We moved to Florida the night after my winter formal. One night I was with one of my friends. The next morning I was in a car ride out to Florida. I still had my friend's rose and chocolate he had given me as a gift with me in the seat. I remember sitting in my room even after it had been put together. It felt like I was living in a strange.
The way she's describing that move to Florida, that sounds like a quick move in the night. That sounds, did they quickly move out of Arizona? Because I thought Tim got a job. I could be wrong. That was odd. Okay. Because before they moved into the new house, they already had the room built. So no, it wasn't a move in the middle of the night. Because as soon as they arrived to the house in Florida, they already had the room built. Maybe, I guess they just didn't communicate to the children when they were moving, which is strange to me, especially for children that old. Okay.
House. Like all this was all temporary. A poorly planned joke. It felt like we were on vacation and we're going to go back anytime. And secretly, I wish we did. We did end up moving, at least my siblings and I did, but not in the way we imagined. My brother ran away again. He did not come back and everyone got tense. My father got even more angry. One night, my sister and I were tasked with cleaning the kitchen. We cleaned and went to our rooms. Then suddenly we hear our father grumbling in a loud tone. He slammed open our doors and asked us why the counters were still dirty and bellowed at us some more, asking if he had to do everything himself. My sister started crying and we silently rewiped the tables. I retreated to our Florida room with my phone. My sister told me she was going on a bike ride. I numbly nodded and went to call my friend. I didn't know what to do. My father came out of his room once and I watched him grab a drink and then hide away back in his room. It didn't quite register with me that my sister had just gone for a bike ride in the middle of the pitch black night. I don't think I would have been surprised if she didn't come back. Running away was no longer an improbability. She did come back and we wondered what the next thing would be. At some point, my parents left the house to go to a softball tournament and my father left the country. I was home alone. I rode my bike from school and band sessions. I was told not to let my brother in the house. I was alone in a new house with just the dogs for company. As of right now, I cannot remember the in-between. The next few things I remember include leaving my room one night and seeing policemen talking to my mom. I remember being afraid of the way they peered around the corner at me. I didn't know what they were talking about. Then I remember someone coming in and taking pictures. We were pulled out of school. As a student who was not known for being a troublemaker, the day I was called to the front office was odd. Someone escorted me to the office. I heard the police announce over their walkie-talkies that I was on my way to the office. I was told over and over again that I wasn't in trouble. I was driven in a car to a meeting point. My sister was in another group of people. We were told to turn off our phones so they couldn't be tracked. We were driven to a place in a state of semi-confusion. Soon we were sitting in a building waiting to be asked questions. I knew exactly why I was there. I knew exactly what they were going to ask about. I cried. I felt so guilty. I felt like I was betraying my parents. But a part of me knew all of this was a long time coming. Then we were shuffled.
Oh no. Can y'all hear me? Hopefully nothing happened to my internet. Okay. Uh-oh. Let me know in the chat if y'all can still hear me.
They didn't have a placement ready for me at first, but the foster parents, my sister and little brother, were going to be sent to luckily allowed me to come.
It's pausing for some reason, and I don't know why. Let me try to close out some stuff. Something's happening. I'm glad y'all can still hear me. Something's happening. I just don't want the stream to crash.
Go back home. I cried to God. Why me? Why us? This isn't fair. Ronan was a child. I have seen what my parents have been saying, and all of it is a bunch of empty excuses, a bunch of flimsy covers for atrocities they committed. Yes, Nola got sent to the hospital.
I don't know. So it keeps, okay, the original. Okay. So I wonder if they cut out
Every
some
now
parts
and
of it.
then. It's how we learn to toughen
wonder if
up.
they cut
My
out some
brother would
parts.
never hurt us intentionally. What would
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the time is still moving. They might have had to edit something out, or maybe the original, maybe their stream paused. It had me really nervous.
a dangerous level? To make matters worse, after Pierce was born, he was moved from his room in the house to a place in the garage. That room stank. He was rarely left alone, and it was often dark. He was sent there for a variety of reasons. These range from major behavior.
Whoa. The baby was sent to the room in the garage? The baby? The baby was sent to the room in the so I did not watch all of this statement. I knew I was going to watch it with you all. I was not aware of that, because the state's going to ask for Tim to not have any contact with any of the children. The judge is going to do what he does. We'll get there, but wow.
Issues to the most minor issues, such as talking back, which was usually just trying to explain himself. Most of the time, it was these little issues. I sent my father into a rage, and my mother followed in his footsteps. If he said anything, it would be talking back. And if he said nothing, it would be rude because he wasn't answering his questions. Again, I ask, what is a kid supposed to do?
Sorry, I got confused. I think she was talking about RF. She wasn't talking about the baby. I think she was talking about RF, because that's what the father would do to RF. He would ask him a question, and if he answered, he would get mad. And if he didn't answer, he would get mad. And a child learned helplessness, where it's just like, because like there's no way out of this, and like you're just going to be mad either way.
You in that situation. It's not fair. I couldn't do anything about it, and I should not have been worried about doing anything. I should not have had to worry and continue to worry for my brother's life. Nola have to be so angry about her parents. Ronan should not have to feel so guilty about the abuse inflicted on him. Pierce should not have to grow up without his siblings. My siblings and I should not have to see our last names in the news. We should not have to see our parents' mugshots. We deserve as regular of a life as we can get. I know I want that for them, at least. Thank you for taking the time to hear me. Fiona Ferriter.
Thank you. You have another statement, Ms. Coates?
Yes, Your Honor. This one is from Nola Ferriter. All of the past almost 2 years have been a whole life turning experience. It has had huge ups and downs. Some of the time I felt like I just wanted it all to be over with and all gone. I did not usually express my emotions, but when I do, it all comes out. Every time that has happened, it has had something to do with my parents. They can say all they want, that they love me and my siblings and care for us, but do they really? They say it, but they don't show it. If they really did, all of this would have been in the past, over, and they would do what's best for my siblings and my mental health, especially my brother Ronan. They have put him through so much, and I will never forgive them for treating him the way they did. After everything they did to him, all the abuse, neglect, they keep on saying it's all his fault. None of this has ever been at all his faults. Parents should be parents, which means parents should be loving and caring, and they were none of that. When I lived in that house, I used to think saying I love you was weird. We never said it to each other. My dad would always either be working or watching TV. We hardly had times where we would come out and hang with the family. I was also never allowed to hang out with my brother Ronan and my sister, and I never got the bond that sisters are supposed to have because our parents wouldn't let us be kids. When I was there in that house, I had to be perfect no matter what. I had once been playing around with a friend in class, and the teacher had said something to my parents about it. Later, when I got home, I got yelled at and yelled at. There were no mistakes allowed. At first, I thought the way our household was run was normal. I had thought that my brother living separate from us was normal because they always said it was because of his actions. Now being older, Ronan did not do anything wrong. He was being a kid. He was not allowed to do anything, so he went back at them as a kid would usually do. If the parents say no, the kids want to do it more. Right before we moved to Florida is when I started realizing that the way that my mom and dad acting was not right. I had started to get afraid of him and would hide in my sister's room with her so I did not need to see him. I had always seen the way he treated Ronan. It was horrific. No child should be ever treated in such a way. I have seen my brother being held back by the back of his neck to walk to the bathroom, being screamed at the top of my dad's lungs. Ronan screams for my dad. I've heard the whip of the jump rope hit Ronan and the slaps of banging on the wall. Being in that house was scary. My brain has tried to let me forget a lot of what happened and has locked it away. They can say all they want that Ronan had put me in the hospital and been a danger to us, but all he was doing was playing around and being a kid. And I also played around with him too. The way Tim talks about my brother is crazy. Saying all of this is his fault is insane. How does a person not care at all about a child he himself raised from a baby? Nothing Tim did is justified.
That was really, he raised him as a baby. And I totally agree that with reactive attachment disorder, with adoptees, and they really caution. So the DSM-5 kind of made some changes and has some cautionary tales. Reactive attachment disorder is like it's not common, and it does happen often. And this child may have had some attachment difficulties, but this home was not safe. In order to attach, there has to be safety. And I'm saying that because he has been found guilty of this, and he has been found guilty of these, I think, 3 different things. And because of that, this child was just trying to survive. And even with that survival mode, what he was doing wasn't even that bad. And the judge is going to say that. Nothing, like he wasn't threatening them with like weapons, or like he wasn't doing anything like that. I work with individuals with much more severe behaviors. I work with a lot of really difficult cases. This was a family, but this was a dad. I think dad has anger issues, and they're going to talk about that later. But these girls are so brave. They're so strong. And you can hear the emotion in the lawyer's voice as she's reading it. You really can.
Tim and Tracy have put me and my siblings through so much bad mental health.
And so this is their birth daughter, okay? The one who's talking now. So the oldest is so FF is their adoptive daughter. NF is their birth daughter. And she's calling them Tim and Tracy. Like that shows you where she's at with them.
At one point, I was scared to go out of my house because I thought my parents were stalking me. I saw them once after school while I was walking to get picked up.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object again on grounds, both as to Fiona and Nola's statements about actions from the parents towards them.
This is a great question. And anyone who followed the full trial, I think the only official diagnosis was ADHD. And I think maybe when he was like 8 or 9, but in order to give, so I would not have given this diagnosis because he was currently in a not safe home. So even if he did get that diagnosis, there's no way for that individual to say that it wasn't because of the parents' behavior, like his adoptive parents. Okay, because it would have been totally okay for him to have difficulty attaching to a hot cold. And I don't think that, I haven't heard that the dad was like overly loving or like supportive with him. It sounds like he was highly critical of him, especially once the baby boy was born. Now he did, like when younger than 8, he did have some behavior problems. My 6-year-old, like kids have behaviors and they need support. But it's up to the parents to manage their own emotions. And to me, from what I've seen, it sounds like the child's behaviors angered the adult Tim so much that he then harmed the child. Like that's what he's been found guilty of. So discipline has an end. So this child did not have a room in the house. I don't believe the parents ever thought that this child was going to come back he was never going to live in the house they had in Florida. There was nothing he could do to escape the room with no bathroom. There was nothing he could do. And so let's keep going.
That are not related to the child are F. Additionally,
I'm going to fast forward. They're going to complain about stuff. He's gonna, that's the defense lawyer being upset about
They
stuff.
have kept me away from my younger brother. I have not seen him in over a year, and they will not let my in the morning with. I was walking to get picked up and I froze. I couldn't feel a thing, and my instinct was to walk away and not say anything. This is the first time that I have seen them since they got arrested the first time. The first time they got arrested, I had seen them that day in the morning with my brother Pierce. After then, I never wanted to see them again. They have kept me away from my younger brother. I have not seen him in over a year, and they will not let me speak to him on the phone. All this has hurt me so bad when I feel like nothing can hurt anymore. Me, Fiona, and Ronan are all good kids and did not deserve any of this. Sincerely, Nola Ferriter. And then finally, I have a letter from James Roberts, who he doesn't want it read out loud, but I have.
All right. And so we are going to take a breath because we're all about to get really, really mad. Okay. So the judge, I'm not going to play the back and forth. So the judge specifically asked what were the reasons the defense wanted him to downgrade, which means I believe, not a lawyer, which means sentencing him to something less than the minimum. And the prosecution talked about why they thought he should not be downgraded. I believe the prosecution recommended 15 years. I could be wrong. I believe the sentence that the prosecution recommended was 15 years. So 255, 44. Let's go ahead and fast forward. 255, 44. There we go. Okay, I've already warned you. Like we're not going to be happy. Okay, and all right, let's go.
They are not victims in this case. So it's the same as like a restitution between the act, the criminal act,
They're going
and
blah blah blah.
what the court orders. So if this court orders no contact,
I think okay. So I'm going to keep this. I didn't do 255. I think it was 255, 44. I believe. There we go. So let's come up to here.
Of your respective positions. I understand that this is a difficult and challenging case for both sides, and certainly the facts are not easy for the court to address. Let me state up front that the court has reviewed everything. I've closely considered the testimony that was presented today and all of the evidentiary submissions that were provided to the court in advance to review in preparation for this hearing. And I've taken all of that into consideration as to what will ultimately be my ruling here. I will say up front that the court's job is not to please either side in terms of its ruling on sentencing, and I don't ever consider that. I always approach it from the standpoint of based on the totality of circumstances in any given case, what is the appropriate sentence to mete out an appropriate justice in the case.
I saw a comment and I want to say, so the state will likely never bring charges against what the girls witnessed because it would likely be something that would happen in juvenile court, but not criminal court. So in criminal court, a jury has to find them guilty of something, and it was easiest to prosecute it against this because there is video of what happened to him. It's really hard to prosecute for what other people saw. So like if I witnessed somebody else being harmed, now it's going to have an impact on me. It's going to create an issue. I might be able to sue them civilly, but the person who was actually harmed is going to be the one that's going to typically have. Now, if they made a threat towards me or something, but this case is, they will never bring charges, I don't think, in criminal court for the daughters. They could potentially talk about emotional abuse in more of a juvenile termination of parental rights type of case. And termination of parental rights is typically in juvenile court. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been involved in cases like this, testified for different situations as an expert witness, and that is my understanding of the process in most places. All right, so let's keep going.
Case that I'm dealing with at that specific point in time. So I suspect that whatever I do today will probably make everyone unhappy because it's going to be a decision that nobody gets what they want. And sometimes that's probably the best approach by the court. Let me talk a little bit about the facts that I am basing my decision on and what I've observed during the course of this sentencing hearing and in the context of the evidence that I'm privy to by virtue of having sat on at the trial. I found that, at least based on the evidence, that the defendant clearly, and he was found by the jury to have been guilty of the 3 charges of which they rendered the verdict on. And so that puts me in a position of finding that the defendant engaged in conduct that the jury found to be criminal for an extended period, and that the conduct he engaged in was considered, it was calculating, it was methodical, and it was planned. I mean, you look at the construction of the room and what that took to put into place, and just the structure, not only of the building of the room itself, but of the method of discipline during the time that RF spent in state of Florida. The one thing that, and the reason I mention that is because there were plenty of opportunities. This wasn't a 1-day deal or a 2-day deal. This was a situation that occurred over a 6-week period in the state of Florida. And so what that tells me is that there were plenty of opportunities that the defendant had to reflect on whether what he was doing was wrong. And over the 6-week period in the state of Florida, it appears that he never took the time to reflect, and he never concluded that what he was doing was wrong. And there is evidence to suggest that he did know what he was doing was wrong, because there was evidence that he instructed RF to dump the urine bucket in the bushes and not let the neighbors see him. There was evidence of Mrs. Ferriter removing the bucket from the room prior to law enforcement going into the room. So there was evidence that the court can at least look to that convinces me that the defendant knew what he was doing was wrong and never reflected once to take a remedial or corrective course. And I think ultimately that's what influenced the jury's decision in this matter. So there were opportunities along the way for the defendant to do what I would call a sanity check on whether what he was doing was the correct approach and maybe a need to reverse course. That never happened. I mentioned this because I spent a lot of, this isn't the first thought or consideration that I'm giving to this. I've spent a lot of time dealing with this case and trying to determine whether the defendant has any redeemable qualities that should influence the court's decision. And on this point, I cannot say that the defendant is devoid of any redeemable qualities. I've obviously reviewed a lot of statements. I've reviewed photos, and it certainly appears that at times his family had very good times and experiences, and that at times he was attempting to be the basically textbook father. But that's what was on the surface. Because what's clear is that although things appeared to be very, very perfect on the surface, that what was going on below the surface was not so perfect, and that a very deep, dark family secret was being maintained in that household. And that is, the defendant clearly was abusing his oldest son, which the jury has found that he did. And I will tell you that it's not lost on the court that the defendant was struggling himself as to how to deal with the discipline of the child. I don't think that the evidence that was submitted, it all reflected RF as a problem child, to the extent that he was really beyond anything that normal kids do. And sitting up here on criminal court, I see it every day. And things like stealing candy, wrestling with your sister and injuring or something like that, those are not serious instances that would ever justify the level of discipline that was imposed here.
Abuse.
And the other thing I would say is, even, and let me just digress for a moment. I've looked at the redemptive qualities that the defendant has, and he doesn't have a prior history. He has no criminal background, and he has experienced a loss himself.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Chat. Dominique. Dominique, you had to go there? So would this judge, if this had been a Black man and maybe unemployed, and I'm just saying, like if there had been a completely different, because I think this judge sees Tim as like a working father who was like devoted and religious and just wanted what was adopted 2 kids, like like, oh, how great. Like, but what if it had been, what if he had done the exact same thing to a birth child? And what if he wasn't European American? And would that, and we already know with the criminal justice system that the browner the skin, we typically view criminality, like we often view like that when based on race, sometimes that certain races need to be punished. And sometimes we just as a bias, sometimes view that some people have more redemptive qualities. You didn't have to go there. Thank you that you did. Thank you for going there, because I agree. So it wasn't just race. I think it was also class, and I think his level of education and the fact that he could afford this good lawyer. So his lawyer did, like, she put on the best defense she could. I don't think I think if he had a public defender, he probably would have settled, because I don't think a public defender. Now, I'm just being honest. Like she tried her best, and she made herself look, ooh, because I had to. Now she had to defend him, but the thing she said to try to justify the video that we have, and we know that this is what happened, but they're trying to excuse it, to say it doesn't. He didn't know. He had no malice. He had no ill. Like he didn't have any ill intention in his heart. Like, the fact that they do all that. I did not listen, because there is audio of him talking to the victim, and it just sounds very traumatizing. I won't listen to that. I do have a video coming up on confirmation bias. I still need to schedule that, but that's something that I do want to talk about too, because I think this judge was looking for a reason to be more lenient, and he actually made up one. We'll keep going.
In terms of the utter collapse of his family and having all of his children taken away. But I also note that he stated that he was born and raised on Quantico, at Quantico Base. So I suspect that tells me, knowing that it's a Marine Corps base, that he probably grew up in a very disciplined environment. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie The Great Santini, but there was a movie where Marine, the Great Santini, he was a tough disciplinarian father as well. And if you ask Pat Conroy today, he probably would find a way to say he loves his father in some ways, but I'm sure at some point in time he hated his father. And the reason I point that out is, again, I'm looking for any redemptive aspect of the defendant's nature and character that would give me some ability to factor that in as a positive point in this case for sentencing. At the end of the day, the jury found the defendant guilty of the 3 charges that were in the verdict, and so I'm bound by that. So the first question that I will have to look at is whether there's a legal basis for a downward reduction. And before I get into that in more detail, I will say that whatever the sentence is that I impose in this matter, it will be for a defined period, and it will come to an end. And at some point, the defendant will have the opportunity to try to put his life back together. And I get it that his life has been turned upside down
due to his behaviors,
and from his vantage point, probably destroyed at this point. But the pain and the suffering that he's experiencing will end at some point, and he'll have an opportunity to move forward. The concern I have is that for the victim, the treatment to which he was subjected to by his father will be with him for a lifetime. And I know that, and I always listen to the victim's statements very carefully. And I know that he's professed that he loves his father, and he's asked for the court to take a specific route in terms of sentencing. But the bottom line is that he was subjected to an abuse that should never be experienced by any kid, by any from any parent. And I can't just look at the victim's wishes alone in determining what is an appropriate sentence, because no parent can ever be justified in doing what Mr. Ferriter did to his son RF in this particular instance. And I remain concerned that, as I've said, that that most, if not all, of the problems were caused by the defendant himself and his discipline of the child, and the
Abuse.
long-term harm and emotional impact that the victim probably doesn't even know he is going to suffer for the future as a result of the conduct he was exposed to. So, as you can tell, I've considered a lot of things. So this brings me to the ultimate question of what is an appropriate sentence for the defendant on the charges for which he has been found guilty. So let me address the matter of the defense motion for downward departure.
Let's breathe, chat. We're not going to be happy. Okay.
All right. So as I've said, the first 2 points that were raised by the defendant for downward departure, I don't believe that they met their burden of establishing a sufficient factual basis based on competent, substantial evidence for the utilization of Section 921.00262F, which grants the court the ability to downward.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I think even the fact that the judge keeps calling it discipline, 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 I do think the judge sees it, that this was a father trying to discipline his child. And I think that plays in. And that's why I intentionally, every time he said discipline, I said the other word, because that was not discipline. That was not okay. And also, people keep talking about the grandmother. So the judge does try, I think, to protect future children. If the grandmother is ever found, letting him have unsupervised contact or letting him participate in the discipline of the child, that's when she could lose. But it's so hard. Like once someone's adopted, it is hard to track those things. Kids in foster care, like they have a worker that checks in with them every so often. And the youngest, he's not even going to be fully aware of all that's happened. Let's keep going.
Depart where the victim was an initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. I don't believe that under the circumstances of this case that there is any basis for the court to use this as a legal prong justifying a downward departure. And I think if there was, then it would potentially throw child abuse cases, flip them on their head in terms of what parents can do and ultimately what the court can do in terms of sentencing.
Okay, so I skipped that part because I believe the defense tried to say that they wanted him to downward depart based on number one, because I think they were trying to say that, I think they tried to claim self-defense. Was that? Let me know if I hallucinate. I don't think I'm almost positive when I was watching that, I heard self-defense come out of this. So he is tall. I think RF is kind of smaller. Like for some reason, he tried to claim self-defense. Like what? Like the gonads to say self-defense? What? Okay. So why didn't the judge put what the doctor said in consideration? Which doctor? I don't know which one. Which doctor? So that's what the defense tried to say, and the judge is about to say that he can't do that. Okay, so the judge is about to say that I think it was the defense had a doctor that talked about reactive attachment disorder, and I think I guess that doctor might have said that and it pains me, like the words can't come out my mouth because that it's so ludicrous. Okay. It's so ludicrous what the individual proposed. I disagree. And I didn't, but like y'all. So I think they tried to go with self-defense because of maybe he was protecting his other children. Probably that might have been something that that was said. So he had to separate him. Like this child was so dangerous, he had to be, but he wasn't. He wasn't that dangerous. The last doctor that testified. Okay. So this was very difficult to watch. Okay. So I had to skip through some of it. So yeah. All right, let's keep it going.
Likewise, I don't find any merit in the ground that was asserted in 921.00262F, dealing with the question of the need for restitution outweighing the need for a prison sentence. Under the circumstances involving RF in this instance, I don't believe restitution is a factor at all. It won't be a factor in my sentencing decision. So again, I don't think the defense has met its burden here. So that brings me to the last prong that I did give very serious consideration. Section 921.0026 that states that the court may consider the enumerated downward departure grounds, but I'm not limited to them. So that means that if there's competent substantial evidence of something else, that I can consider it. And as I
And it seems like the judge, I don't even know that the defense asked the judge to do this. I think the judge is just doing this. Like, I don't think the defense specifically argued that, but it sounded like the judge was looking for a reason to do this. And so that's where I'm not sure if it'll hold up on appeal. I don't know what the appellate court, if they'll agree that that wasn't a reason to give a lighter sentence.
understand the Montana's case, and I get that the Montana's case cited by the defense is not on all fours, a perfect match, but the court does make a statement there that does give this court some feeling that I could look to this particular section as a reason to downward depart if I wanted to. And that is, while no case has ever permitted a downward departure sentence based on that reason, and that was the reason they were talking about in Montana's, such a reason was not otherwise prohibited by law. So that brings me to the question that I ask, is the issue of, without in any way, shape, or form looking to the conduct of the victim as justification or excuse here, can I look to the mental status or situation that the defendant was experiencing and use that as a possible basis under the catch-all provision that would give me the ability to downward depart? And I'm not aware of any case that says I can't. And so, not being aware of any case that says I can't, I'm going to make a finding that under 921.0026, under the catch-all provision, that if I think the competent substantial evidence does support the argument that I can look to the conduct of the defendant and what he was experiencing and what he believed to be the case, and whether that belief was irrational or not influenced what turned out to be horrible decisions, can I consider that? Because I think that is analogous to what the court did do in the Montana's case. And so I'm going to find that under that section, I can, and I do find there's been enough evidence for me to at least consider the catch-all provision. And let me talk about a few things that I recall hearing today and also that I recall hearing during the trial. There's no question that the defendant was acting aggressively and irrationally at times during the videos that we saw. And there is no question that there was a methodical, calculated effort to discipline his son in a way that I think he thought was appropriate and believed was appropriate. Although, again, that's weak and.
But the jury said it wasn't, and we all, as rational, like, we all know that it wasn't. It wasn't okay. Like, it would almost, but, and what about what, I think it was FF that said, the oldest sister, what if that child was no longer here? Like, what if there was an emergency in the house and they couldn't unlock it in time? Like, and what if, like, I can't, I can't. That's why. So I had about like an hour to like listen to this. And I was like, I need to do this on Saturday because I cannot wrap this up in just like that was so because he thought it was okay, we're not going to hold him as accountable. But I hope that this judge, if somebody steals food and they are unable to afford food, I hope that this judge gives them a lighter sentence. I hope that, and I don't know this judge. Does that make sense? Like, I disagree with the. I think he should have at least got the minimum, whatever the minimum was required for his highest level, because he's charged with felony child abuse and neglect. That's what he's been charged with, and this judge has given leniency with it. I also think we underestimate the effect of neglect. Of because I think if dad had broken his arm, I think if dad had caused him to go to the hospital, I think if in any situation, if a child had been like, I think we view certain types of of harm stronger than others. But neglect, I work with kids that have been neglected, and the mind f that does to the individual that's experienced it, because it doesn't leave a mark. It doesn't leave a mark. And the judge did more than RF was asking for. I still wanted the judge to send like a message that what you went through was real and there are real consequences when parents do stuff like this. To send a whole message to this whole community. Don't be in this community. Don't we protect children? I don't think this happened. And sadly, with adopted kids, especially, and November is National like Adoption Month. And I like to focus on adoptees and their experience, because this what happened to these children, like on top of his adoption trauma, on top of the abandonment, he also loses another set of parents, and then there's a judge that's excusing because of the dad's mental health. Oh, we're going to go a little lighter on him because he didn't view it as wrong, which I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't have to. So the judge, like he gets like, that's the thing about being a judge. And I personally, I wouldn't be a judge. I wouldn't want the responsibility he has. I wouldn't want to have to sit through every moment of a case and not have an opinion and then try to be impartial and do all. I wouldn't want to do that. Wow. We're going to keep going.
By the fact that he did try to conceal that conduct from the neighbors. And so that cuts against that conclusion somewhat. But I do think that the defendant probably came from a disciplined environment, having grown up in Quantico, and maybe that's all he knew. I don't know that that's the case or not, but having been a Marine, I know how Marines operate, and I know how disciplined the environment can.
Whoa, did the judge say that he was a Marine? Did y'all hear that? I'm gonna go back. I think the judge said having been a Marine. Okay, let me that might make some of this make sense. If the judge was a Marine.
All he knew. I don't know that that's the case or not, but having been a Marine, I know how Marines operate, and I know how disciplined the environment can be. And I will say,
that's what I heard. Normally Marines, they say once a Marine, always a Marine. So I normally don't hear Marines say having once been a Marine. That's not something. Normally I hear having, because I'm a Marine. I know, but maybe he just said it that way. That yes. And I just want to highlight Lisa, because the mental is so much more painful and it doesn't leave. So people, because it has the person question their reality, their experience, their own life. And so I think that might be what played into things here. Please ask. So I don't know if any of the lawyers are going to cover this case. So I follow a lawyer, Emily D. Baker. She normally stays away from cases like this. Rob, Law and Lumber. And then there are a ton of, Natalie. Yes. Natalie did a great video on the P. Diddy, and she has a video at 6:30 p.m. talking about the settlement between Diddy and, I'm bad with names, maybe Chrissy, maybe. She has a video coming out on that settlement. But please ask any questions there. A lot of them, they might, if you tweet at them sometimes, they might answer questions too. But wow.
That as horrible as the conduct was, the defendant's response.
He won't say the word. He's like, did you hear that breath? I'm gonna rewind that back. I've been watching too much of Spidey. I've been watching too much Spidey. I think he wanted to use a stronger word there, and he went with conduct.
The conduct was the defendant's response in dealing with his son in terms of the room. If you look at the photos, there clearly were times that this family was a better functioning family. They had good times. It wasn't all horrible. It wasn't all the most deplorable of circumstances. And I get it now that the two daughters, that they seem to be extremely harmed by this. But there were times when they appeared to be enjoying things, and I've seen those photos. So I don't cast the broad net of putting the defendant in the category of always having been a terrible father. There were times when he tried to do the right thing, and I think did do the right thing in terms of exposing his kids to things that were positive in their lives. But that's not the end of the story, because he obviously exposed them to things that were deplorable, criminal, and that no children, neither the victim nor their siblings, should have ever been exposed to. And any type of physical abuse where a child is being held by the throat by a parent is just not acceptable in any civilized society, and certainly putting a child in a locked room, restricting the access to any air conditioning
Bathroom, windows.
is not appropriate, certainly not in Florida. So at the end of the day, I'm going to find a basis to downward depart under the catch-all. So the question then is whether I should exercise my discretion in doing it. Because I do find that this is a somewhat unique and complex situation because of the situation that maybe the victim has RAD. It's not totally clear that he does. It's not totally clear that what he has wasn't caused specifically by how he was treated by his parents. But I do recognize that there's enough that it creates an issue where this is not your normal situation of child abuse where their children are put in a cage or a box.
That was icky. I think this is about to be icky. I'm sorry. This is about to get really icky, because I think this was worse. So if your abuser is really kind and is like loving, but then is also abusing you, that is still like, sometimes that does more to the brain versus if they're evil all the time, then you hate them. But like, to me, this was worse. To me, but I'm a therapist. Okay. I have a pretty good idea just in general of the types of harm that stuff like this can do. I completely disagree, and I'm saying it as strongly as I can without like throwing something like, okay.
And there's no nothing that explains what was going on here. Ultimately, the state is requesting 15 years. And I think the defense is requesting 1 year based on the motion, followed by probation. And I do note that I can go all the way up to 40 years. So at the end of the day, as I said before, I am totally convinced that what I do will not please anyone here, but ultimately the buck stops for me and the responsibility ends with me and falls on my shoulders to issue a sentence that I think is appropriate to the circumstances. And I will say that it is not lost on the court that not only is the defendant here going to be the one to suffer the weight of the sentence that I impose, but the entire family has already suffered the trauma and the ramifications and consequences of the defendant's conduct. And on that issue, I do think that the defendant exercised and expressed his remorse at that. I just wish he'd have been a little more forceful in getting.
Mostly for the girls and his wife. I didn't hear it because we watched it. We watched it at the beginning of his statement, the part of the statement that was to RF. Callie, it's not going to be good. You're not going to be happy. Okay. Like you are not going to be happy, Callie. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought we all knew it's not going to be, but it's probably going to be appealed. Okay. The state is probably going to appeal this, especially because there wasn't legal precedence for what he's doing. He's doing something that's outside of, from my understanding, from what I saw, not a lawyer. He added something using some leeway that might be in the law, and the what's the word? The appeals court is going to decide whether that was legal, whether he had the legal authority to do that or
Point
not.
to me that he actually acknowledges that what he did was wrong, and I didn't get that. I still didn't get that because I have some sneaking feeling that if all things being equal, the defendant might say that he would do the same thing over again because he thought it was the right thing to do out of love at the time he did it.
This is maddening. Okay, we heard this, right? Like he would do it. I truly believe he would do it again. I think he would do it again. I truly think. I don't think, like, all things the same. If he could not get caught, I think he could do it again. I think he would do it again. I have to rewind a little bit because I got mad. Okay.
Forceful in getting the point to me that he actually acknowledges that what he did was wrong, and I didn't get that. I still didn't get that because I have some sneaking feeling that if all things being equal, the defendant might say that he would do the same thing over again because he thought it was the right thing to do out of love at the time he did it, and that creates problems for me. I hope that I'm wrong on that, but at least that doubt has been allowed to remain in my head. So, all right, so enough said on this. I am going to exercise my discretion to downward depart here. I'm going to, but I will tell you that the downward departure is not even remotely close to what the victim has requested, nor the defense counsel requested. And at the end of the day, the sentence that I'm going to impose is going to be longer than what the guidelines provide. I'm going to downward depart from 75 months to 60 months, and followed by 5 years of probation, 2 years of the first 2 years of probation of which will be in CC2. During the term of probation, the defendant is not to have any contact initiated with any of the 3 older children. Those children will be free once they reach age of majority to have contact with the defendant if they so choose. In any event, even if the children so choose to have contact with the defendant, they will not be able to do so until the defendant has first completed the following conditions of probation.
The judge tried.
I'm going to require that the defendant undergo a 40-hour anger management class, which can be taken while he is in custody, that he undergo a 40-hour parenting course, and that he also undergo a mental health evaluation. With respect to the youngest child, given the nature of the appointment or the adoption there, I'm going to require any contact or visitation be supervised, but ultimately subject to any restrictions that the dependency court imposes, because
There's no
obviously the
dependency court
dependency
involvement.
court, if they're still involved, then maybe they're not involved anymore. They don't have any jurisdiction anymore. So I'm going to leave it that there be no contact unless it's supervised with respect to the younger child. And
5
the
years.
reason the court is allowing that is the circumstances that presently exist. The youngest child has been adopted by the wife's mother, and it's just not realistic in the court's view that where the adoption was permitted of the wife's mother,
And the
that
state
any
allowed that.
rational people looking at this situation would conclude that the parents are not going to have any contact with that child, or they should not have allowed the adoption to be by the wife's mother to begin with. So
There's some confidential provisions that we're not privy to, but that's generally the expectation is that there'll be substantially like that there won't be.
I am privy to them because I was present, and I don't believe that's true, but I think that if the court could say that whatever is in, I just don't know if the easiest thing.
well, what does the why don't you approach on that one point, because I don't want to.
I'm going to fast forward through that
inadvertently
part. Because I think they're talking about the children that are still in custody. And I don't know that the girls are ever going to want to talk to him again.
minor, the youngest child.
I'm going to go back. There we go.
All right, so with respect to contact with the minor, the youngest child, I'm going to allow supervised contact as permitted by the adoptive mother, but it must be supervised. So there shall be no unsupervised contact between the youngest child and the defendant where there isn't another adult present. And I'm also going to, it's just as a condition of that, require that the defendant not be in any way, shape, or form engaged in the discipline of the youngest child. That is something now that rests solely with the adoptive mother, and the defendant has no say in that. I want to make sure that that's clear. Let me comment just very briefly, and then I'll be concluding this hearing. Ultimately, when I started this process, I was looking at a sentence that was in excess of what I've ultimately rendered today. So the court was moved to some extent by the tremendous showing of support that the defendant had and the number of character references, who I'm sure all saw the side of the defendant that is the side that we've heard, the two sides of the same coin. But there was enough support for Mr. Ferriter to, at least for me to have some comfort in concluding that at his core, although he did a very, very, very bad thing here, was not an innately evil person. And so that's why I've ultimately elected to have the sentence be what I've indicated. And as harsh as that may seem to some of...
Okay, so for anyone that wasn't here earlier, I mentioned that for some reason in our justice system, when somebody does it to their own child or an adopted child, they sometimes, their penalty isn't as harsh as if they do it to a stranger. That is how our justice system works. Like it just is. Because I think the general public gets more concerned about somebody who would lock up a stranger's child. Now me, because I'm a therapist, I'm not a lawyer. As a therapist, I think children should be safe at home. I think they should be safest at home. But the statistics show that children, the people are most likely to have something happen by someone that they know. So I work with a lot of people that are afraid of like strangers or like somebody like grabbing off the street or something like that. Like, and that's why having safety, having conversations with your child, not reacting. So like if my child, and we had something happen at his school with that we had to address with someone else, and nothing, no tease, but like it was something that I was glad that because our child feels safe, he immediately told us that something wasn't okay. and we ended up we handled it. Once again, not like a T, not a trauma or anything. But this what this judge did is really, really common. Okay. It just is. And yes, thank you for pointing this out. Same thing for DV. So, like, if somebody is a risk, so like there are situations where a partner can harm the parent, like their other partner, and that person get a protective order, but then they have to co-parent with that person. And sometimes they set up safety stuff where like they don't have to do the exchange, but if that person has never been found to be a danger, an immediate danger to their children, they'll often be able to have contact with their children. We have parental rights. I enjoy parental rights. Parents are able to decide as long as they don't break the law. So there are things that parents are legally allowed to do in my state that as a therapist, I don't think is a good idea. So it's illegal for me to hit my husband, but it's not illegal to do the same thing to my child. So I choose to not do that to my child because I don't think that's right. Now he does have consequences. We do. So their discipline doesn't have to be this punitive. I think this child wouldn't give him the satisfaction. And I think they might have misinterpreted because this child might have smiled a little like when he was getting in trouble. I've worked with people like that where they thought the person enjoyed getting punished or they enjoyed like nothing fazed them, no punishment was ever harsh enough. And that's where we that's where we shift our focus or we realize they might not be showing the same types of reaction. You get the person help, okay? You don't lock them in a room. Like you just don't do those things. I don't think we need to finish the end. Like I just think he's gonna go blah blah blah. He did order him to have that anger management, and the state specifically asked for a specific number of hours. So the reason why he did that, so the state said, if you order parenting or if you order anything like that, I wish he had also ordered a risk assessment because a psychological isn't a parenting capacity. But I think his parental rights might end up getting terminated for all the children. They could be. I don't know. I don't know if they will. He might still get visitation with parental rights being terminated, but parental rights for all the children may. I don't know what the state is doing. Juvenile court is always sealed. They are probably going to work on terminating parental rights because if he still has parental rights, the adoptive, and maybe he did have to sign over his parental rights to legally adopt for Tracy's mom to legally adopt the youngest. I wonder what's happened with that. Sorry, I just hit the mic, but yeah. I'm glad we agree that we don't want to hear anything else from the judge. I like I said, I try to come from I've told y'all I'm normally on the kids side. Like it's just I started this work to work with kids and teens. I work a lot with families. I know that there are parents that are one way in my office and another way that and not something that's like harmful, but like to me, they're all like, oh, but they're probably yelling at like things, they aren't showing me exactly what the kid sees. And I just try to create a safe space where if anything ever isn't okay, that somebody would be safe enough to say it. And then I also understand that some people don't say anything because they fear like what it might be to not be with their family. Courts will say that kids do best if they can have their safe birth parents, if they can. And that's where there have been situations where somebody has they've done stuff really wrong, and it didn't get to the legal side, but it ended up on the juvenile court side. And the person had to do anger management, had to do therapy. They had to jump through all these hoops, and they worked towards getting their child back. I'm also following that case of that mom that, so trigger warning, that mom that she had two boys, 6 years old and 9 years old. I think it's Tiffany. I could be wrong, but I think the name was Tiffany. But she pretty much executed them like in the house and went out to the yard. I'm following that case because she made some weird statements about like Facebook, like I don't know, that like she felt she was being influenced by stuff. And I don't know if she's trying to do an insanity defense. The social media with that one, it concerns me a little. And it was really, really hard to watch. I thank you all. I'm so glad that I was able to do this. Please fix whatever's making all the clicks on the audio. Okay. Thank you, Phoenix. I will go back and watch. It might be something on my setup, but I'll definitely go back and take a look at that when I watch it. That case is incredibly horrific, and I guess DSS was involved. And the reason why I want to talk about that one, or they weren't involved. So people had made reports to DSS, and I don't know if their child protective system, if they're going to look into like why or what happened with those reports, because so with the Maya Kowalski case, I was critical that like things seemed to go too far, too fast, and the family really wasn't heard. And there are other situations where sometimes like children aren't safe, and people do need to step in. These systems are there to protect, and it can be really, really complicated, really, really difficult. Okay, it's this. It might be. So I think the sound should be coming through here. I don't know if it's not, but I can. Okay, can y'all hear me? Because the sound should have been coming through this mic, but I might not have set it up right where the audio was coming through my speakers, and I didn't check my settings before I got started. Sorry. Oh, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Can y'all hear me now? Let me know if y'all have any other questions. I'm glad that this validated how some people were feeling. This was really, 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 really difficult. Really, really, really difficult. Really, really difficult. Okay. And that's why I wanted to take some time, sit down with you all, talk through it. And I get why the judge did what he did. Okay. So I don't think the judge was, I don't know that there was legal precedence. And so that's, y'all know I like LawTube, but I'm not a lawyer. So it'll be interesting to see if it holds up on appeal. But going back, and the judge did more than the victim even asked. And I don't know if the judge, if the victim asking for him to show some mercy or leniency, I don't know if that played into it a little bit too. The judge didn't say it was, but I wonder. I appreciate you all. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, so I will still be going live some next week, probably Saturday again. I'm working from home on Wednesday. No, I'm off on Wednesday. I might do something on Wednesday. So I might post a poll to see if y'all would want to do a stream on Wednesday or not. Because if y'all are with y'all's families, hang out with your family, do all that good stuff. I'm definitely not doing anything on Thursday, but then I probably will come back on Saturday. So I'm thinking Wednesday and what's it called? And Thursday. It was my earrings. I think it was my earrings I think the audio came through here and not through here. And so because y'all know I love the earrings. These are my absolute favorite earrings ever. Thank y'all again. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.